are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Friday, the 9th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Pip Thompson and me, Ellie Costello.
Putin blasts Boris. Speaking to former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, Russian President Vladimir Putin accuses Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
We have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
Fit for office. A special counsel investigation into the handling of classified documents said US President Joe Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. But Mr. Biden has dismissed it.
I'm well-meaning and I'm an elderly man and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
We've got the fallout to the Green Plan being axed. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she will apologise for fiscal responsibility after Labour scrapped their £28 billion Green Pledge. Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, spoke to GB News earlier.
Frank, from the original commitment, there's been some substantial changes. One of those is the cost of borrowing has changed a lot. I mean, frankly, I think it is better to come out and say, we know things have changed, we've had to change some of those plans now, rather than try and do that after an election, be straight with people. There's still a very ambitious agenda.
On trans outrage, runners across Britain are furious as Park Run has removed all records from its website. It's in response to the backlash they received for trans women holding the fastest times in female categories.
Chemical attack manhunt continues. The search for the suspect, Abdulazidi, goes on. Our national reporter Theo Chikomba is outside New Scotland Yard.
We'll have the latest at New Scotland Yard as the nationwide manhunt continues for the chemical attack suspect who was last seen crossing Chelsea Bridge just after 11:30 last week Wednesday. The £20,000 reward remains as police search for the suspect.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is to appear exclusively on GB News' People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
And if you missed that, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he will take questions directly from you, the great British public. And if you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today or scan the QR code on screen now.
And we do want to hear your thoughts throughout the programme today, so do keep them coming in to us, gbnews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get a news update with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Ellie. Good morning. It's 9:35. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed back the material immediately. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
There's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Now, Russia's president has told TV presenter Tucker Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the Ukraine war. Asked if he could imagine a scenario in which he would send Russian troops to Poland, he said only if Poland attacks Russia. He went on to say that Russia has no interest in Poland, Latvia or anywhere else. In his first interview, sitting down with a Western journalist since Russia's invasion, Putin also said he had no interest in speaking with the US president until certain demands are met. And Tesco has announced the sale of its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth around £600 million. Barclays is set to take over Tesco's bank credit cards, loans and savings accounts and has also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. Tesco will receive an income for the use of its brands and Barclays will participate in the Tesco Club Card scheme, the UK's largest loyalty programme. The retailer says the deal will help it trim its debts and allow it to be focused on its retail business. 2,800 Tesco employees are to be transferred to Barclays under the agreement over time. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. Now, overnight, Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused former Prime Minister Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
Well, let him cancel his decree and enter into negotiations. We have never refused. And the fact that they obeyed the demand or persuasion of Mr. Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, seems ridiculous and very sad to me. Because, as Mr. Arakamiya put it, we could have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
Well, it was a highly anticipated interview last night. I don't actually know how much we discovered that was new in the interview. It's over 2 hours long, 2 hours, 7 minutes. But the first 30 minutes, if you've managed to catch it, is basically a history lesson from Putin. It was quite a bizarre start to the interview, and you can actually see Tucker Carlson interrupting, saying, how is this relevant, kind of thing. It just seemed like there was a big, a battle of egos between the two men.
And yes, it was a big scoop, but that's not because plenty of other journalists in the West haven't tried to interview Vladimir Putin. They've all been refused. We will be getting more reaction to this. Actually, how challenging really was it? Did Tucker Carlson ask all the right questions? For example, why are 2 journalists still imprisoned in Russia? What about alleged Russian war crimes in Ukraine? There is so much that many people say he didn't ask. And what does Boris Johnson have to say about those comments made by Vladimir Putin? We will be delving into it all. And tell us what you thought of that interview. GBViews at gbnews.com.
Now, the search for the suspected chemical attacker Abdul Zaidi has entered its 10th day. Well, joining us now from News Scotland Yard is our national reporter, Theo Chikomba. Good to see you this morning, Theo. Bring us up to date.
Yes, well, as you say, that manhunt is still continuing. Nationwide manhunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Zaidi. He was last seen crossing the Chelsea Bridge just after 11:30 last week Wednesday, several hours after the attack took place. Now, the police have been working throughout this week, continuing their investigations this week. It was confirmed yesterday that Northumbria police were in the North Tyneside area, where they were carrying out 2 warrants on premises associated with Abdul Azadi. This included a pizza takeaway, which they found nothing there and no arrests were made. But they are continuing to search the area where the attack took place. 250 leaflets have been handed out to people to see whether they can get in touch with any information that they have with potential sightings since last week. But of course, attention turns to where could he possibly be. There are some questions being raised about is there anybody helping him, and whether or not he's being hidden. Now, the police have not confirmed this, and they're still following all lines of inquiries, and it's likely that they'll continue to do so for the remainder of this week as well, as those investigations continue. But we do know that there's been that £20,000 reward for anyone who might have information leading to his arrest. But of course, they are looking through CCTV in central London here, trying to piece together where he could be, having been seen in central London last week. But as you say, for now, though, the investigation continues.
OK, Theo Jakomba there for us in News Scotland Yard. Thank you very much indeed.
So let's discuss this, whatever you thought about it, I'm sure you thought it was fascinating, this interview that Vladimir Putin has given to Tucker Carlson. It dropped overnight, all 2 hours of it, and we are joined by Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Andriy Usadchuk. Really good to have your company this morning. I'm assuming, Andriy, that you watched this interview. What is your immediate reaction to it?
Good morning. I had to, because it's part of my job. I need to know my enemy. And my reaction shortly is very simple. Putin desperately wants to return to Western screens, to Western media. In fact, he received this result. But if you put away all the paranoid lies and things which in reality difficult to analyze, especially his thoughts on history and things like that. But the bottom line for me that Russia is suffering a lot. Russia is suffering from huge losses, and they need a break. It was understood in May 2022 that they need a break, but they use different strategies how to finish the war under their original plan. But all the attempts of Kremlin failed. They cannot succeed in Ukraine at all. Last winter, missile attack against Ukrainian energy sector give them zero result.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's just we've got plenty of questions to ask you and not enough time. What I just want to get your thoughts on how concerned are you about Putin being given a platform like this for such a long period of time? Many people are saying he went unchallenged. He was not asked enough questions. He was not asked about alleged war crimes in Ukraine, for example. How worried are you about the effect this will have on the impact it will have on the people of America, where you're already struggling to get the weapons, aren't you, from the United States?
Yeah, definitely. Carlson was simultaneously the ambassador from Donald Trump. And for sure, one of the audience for this interview was the supporters of Donald Trump and far-right Republicans. And definitely it will help them to believe that stopping support to Ukraine, that's exactly what is needed. But from another hand, I think all European leaders, all responsible American leaders understood after this interview that it is impossible to have any dialogue with this individual, just impossible. And I think that's another fundamental conclusion from this epic talk.
Andre, how is this going to go down in Ukraine? Because this is a very challenging time in this conflict. Pip has already reflected the lack of funding, or at least delay in funding, especially from the US. And we heard at the start of that interview last night, didn't we, Putin reiterating again his thought that Ukraine isn't a real country. And we've heard that rhetoric before. We heard that a lot, didn't we, at the start of this conflict. But 2 years in, almost, how is this going down with the people of Ukraine and in President Zelensky, who has just sacked the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's army, hasn't he?
True. But again, I would ask you not to try to make any deep dives into historical thoughts of Putin. That's all nonsense which has nothing to do with reality. The guy justified the Hitler attack on Poland in his interview to Carter, and other absolutely ridiculous things has been said. So that's why let's focus on another thing. Yes, for Ukraine, the time is difficult and challenging. But I think for today, everyone, mostly in Europe, understand that in worst-case scenario, it's not Ukraine who may lose this war. It's European Union and the free world will lose this war. We went too far in all this confrontation, and originally it was started by Putin as attack against NATO. And that's exactly what he's saying, that he did not start this war. That was his words. So for us, there is no other option rather than fight, because Putin again and again say that he wants to wipe out Ukraine from the geographical map and political map of the world. So we will continue fight. We believe that Europeans will continue to provide huge support to us. UK is doing a great job in supporting Ukraine. You know that the treaty was signed on safety and security guarantees for Ukraine. So we are doing quite good. Not the best as we expect to, but quite good. And still we believe that political fight in US will not result in the collapse of reputation of Washington in the global map. We expect that in a couple of weeks or months.
Andre,
so
very quickly, because we need to go, do you think there is any chance that President Zelensky will now be tempted to do a sit-down chat with Tucker Carlson and reply to what Putin said in that two-hour interview?
We all need to understand that in Kremlin vocabulary, word negotiation means word surrender. That's the only thing what Putin wants. He wants capitulation of Ukraine and the West. That's why I don't think that neither Ukraine nor West is ready for capitulation.
OK. Ukrainian Member of Parliament Andriy Osadchuk, really appreciate your time and your thoughts this morning. Thank you so much.
Yes, let us know what you make of that interview. Up next, do stay with us. Blue cards are set to be introduced in football.
It will see players removed from the field for 10 minutes if they commit a cynical foul or show dissent. First VAR, now this. Does the game need it?
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that.
Yeah.
And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Piers. And, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I am all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead.
The Tata Steel thing.
Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're talking sport now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Blue cards for bad behaviour in football. Paul Clayt is here to explain a little bit more. Do we need another card? We've got red, yellow.
I don't know.
Blue.
Well, we've got the red card, is the sending off. We've got the yellow card, which is the caution. And if they can complicate football anymore, then they'll give it a go. They'll see how we go. So the blue card, which is now, this is not definite this is going to happen. It's going to be trialled, lower levels. They're saying the FA Cup in both for the men and the women's competition. And this is IFAB. Now, IFAB are the rulers, let's say they're the rule makers of football. These are the people that sit down and say, I know, we should use VAR or we should do this and do that, and that would improve the game. So, cut a very long story short, a blue card is there for certain infringements, and those being a cynical foul where maybe they'd think it's not a sending off. What they call them in football is they'd often call them orange, although there's no orange card, but it's like worse than a yellow, but it's not quite a red. So what they'll have is a sin bin. So they'll do the hold up the blue card, which means you'd be sin binned 10 minutes that you'd have to spend off the pitch. So that's for that. And also the other thing is for answering back the referee, which happens a lot. We see a lot of dissent in football these days, which is not good when you see kids watching football.
So that could also be a blue card offence. I mean,
absolutely.
What seems to be one of the criticisms here is that people like to watch free-flowing football.
Yeah.
And it's going to make it more like rugby, isn't it?
Well, I don't know whether that's the case, because it should be there as a deterrent to stop them doing it. But maybe the answer is send more players off. Actually book people for doing it, because it always seems to be the case. The referee's going to make a decision. The players don't like it. Everybody crowds round, and then it filters down. And how many times we see kids doing things that their heroes do. And if they have this sin bin, that's it. You get off the pitch, because not only does it affect the player, but it also affects the team. That's 10 minutes out. And then hopefully they won't do it again.
It is like a timeout, isn't it? It's like the naughty step for toddlers.
You know what? That's exactly what Anne Diamond said earlier. She said exactly that. She's going, is it a naughty step? And I said, that's exactly what it is. It literally is a naughty step for professional footballers.
Briefly, somebody who could be on the naughty step or could be getting a red card is Christian Horner.
Absolutely.
Tell us very quickly the latest.
Right.
There's a hearing today. We don't know where it is, but it's all about allegations of inappropriate behaviour, which he denies.
The complaint of inappropriate and controlling behaviour, which has been made by a female colleague. That's the only thing we know. Now, there's bigger things at play when it comes to Red Bull. Red Bull, hugely successful. And Christian Horner, who runs the Red Bull racing team. Now, this has come up. We don't know whether there's more at play, whether the man who actually founded Red Bull originally, now this is Dietrich Mateschitz, his name is. He died a couple of years ago, and he was the guy that pretty much looked after Christian Horner. He's now not on the scene anymore. I wonder whether there's a power struggle. This story's come up, and now whether this is an aim to elbow him out.
OK, you're across it, we're across it. Paul, thanks very much.
Stay with us. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A milder day out there for large parts of the country, but still cold enough in Scotland for some snow and ice this morning. Met Office warnings remain in place, but the wintry weather over northern England is, well, slowly turning a bit milder. So it's grey and it's dank, but it's not quite as cold as yesterday. Far northwest of Scotland may well stay dry, and there'll be drier spells further south, but there will also be quite a few showers coming through. Bit of sunshine, though. Could see temperatures getting up to 11, 12, maybe even 13 Celsius. Further north, closer to average, but generally milder than yesterday. Still cold, though, with this brisk and bitter easterly wind blowing across eastern and then northern Scotland tonight. And as the wet weather moves northwards, there will be more snow coming in here. Again, mostly over hills. Some of the higher routes won't be very pleasant through this evening. Met Office yellow warning in place for snow and ice here. Further south, temperatures should remain a few degrees above freezing and generally turning drier through the night as well. So a bright start to Saturday across the Midlands and eastern England. Still wet and windy across northern parts of Scotland. Should dry up through the day across the central belt. Elsewhere, we'll see showers coming into the southwest. So South Wales, southwest England, seeing fairly frequent showers during tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, say many places having a bright, fine Saturday, and it's steadily turning milder, although still feeling cold in the far north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, a very good morning. It is Friday, the 9th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ellie Costello and Pip Thompson.
Green Plan axed. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says she will not apologise for showing fiscal responsibility after Labour scrapped their £28 billion Green Pledge. Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, has more.
This is the biggest U-turn in Keir Starmer's leadership history. Can he get away with it? We'll have to wait and find out.
Putin blasts Boris. Speaking to former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, Russian President Vladimir Putin accuses Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
We have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
A special counsel investigation into the handling of classified documents said that US President Joe Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. But Mr. Biden has dismissed it.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is to appear exclusively on GB News People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
If you missed that, on Monday, the Prime Minister will be taking part in the special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. It's going to be hosted by our very own Mr. Stephen Dixon, and over the course of the hour, Rishi Sunak is going to take questions directly from you. So if you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM. You can register your interest today, and also you can scan the QR code on your screen now.
So there is plenty to get stuck into this morning. We're getting lots of your thoughts on that interview with Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson. Was it a masterclass in journalism? Should it indeed have taken place? What do you think? GBViews at gbnews.com. Right, let's get a roundup of all your headlines. Here's Sophia Wensler.
Pip, Ellie, thank you. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed the material back immediately. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president.
President Joe Biden speaking there. Now, Russia's president has told TV presenter Tucker Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war in Ukraine. Asked if he could imagine a scenario in which he would send Russian troops to Poland, he said only if Poland attacks Russia. He went on to say that Russia has no interest in Poland, Latvia or anywhere else. In his first interview sitting down with a Western journalist since Russia's invasion, Putin also said he had no interest in speaking with the US president until certain demands are met.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
However, Kira Rudik, a member of Ukraine's parliament and leader of the Golos party, says Putin does not want peace and does not want to negotiate.
Have heard his narratives. There is nothing new there. He is threatening to destroy the world and saying that Ukraine is not a nation at all. But what is most important, he is trying to persuade all the viewers that he is ready for negotiations. Well, I can tell you this is a lie. I think it will be very dangerous because this interview would definitely try to influence the next US elections. And not the way they were trying to influence the elections beforehand, but in a very open way.
In other news, Tesco has announced the sale of its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth around £600 million. Barclays is to take over Tesco Bank's credit cards, loans and saving accounts and has also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. Tesco will receive an income for the use of its brands and Barclays will participate in Tesco Club Card Scheme, the UK's largest loyalty programme. The retailer says the deal will help it trim its debts and allow it to be focused on its core retail business. 2,800 Tesco employees are to be transferred to Barclays under the agreement over time. The Met Police is failing to tackle child exploitation, leaving vulnerable youngsters at risk. That's according to a watchdog. New findings say the force's response to criminal and sexual exploitation of children was not currently effective, and not enough was being done to protect victims. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services raised serious concerns about the force's performance after more than half of the investigations examined were graded as inadequate. The Met apologised to the children and families it had let down and stressed it was taking urgent and significant steps so no child is left unsafe. And British Airways says it plans to resume flights to and from Israel beginning in April. In a statement on their website, the airline says they will resume flights to Tel Aviv, but with a much reduced service from London Heathrow. British Airways suspended services to Tel Aviv amid ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas following the attack by the terror group on October the 7th. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Fia. It's 7 minutes past 10. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Ellie Costello, and Pip Thompson. And so many of you have been getting in touch this morning. Thank you so much for your emails and for your company. Lots of you getting in touch on the Tucker Carlson and President Putin interview, which was released last night. Tracy says the interview should not have taken place.
And Den, good morning. You say, to be honest, Putin's interview didn't surprise me at all. He will never change. An intimidating man.
On this report into President Biden, which found he was an elderly man with a poor memory, Den saying Biden is self-evidently not fit for the job, never mind president. It's a personal tragedy for him, for which sympathy is due. However, he's obviously incapable of making any decision. The question is, who is?
I mean, in a country of 330-odd million people, it's coming down to an 81-year-old and a 77-year-old.
No. Got to think, is that the best they can offer?
A lot of questions being asked about that. And I would also like to say a very good morning to Susan. Hello, Susan. Hi, Susan. We're getting some hair advice from you this morning, saying that you and I, Ellie, should cut off our weary, outdated, dangling locks.
Oh!
How very kind. Well, Susan, I do appreciate your thoughts. I am off to the hairdressers today, and I will probably get that much cut off my hair. Hope you're all right with that. But hey, if it's a problem, come on the show and we'll have a chat about it. GBViews, gbnews.com.
Now to politics, and remember this tweet from Ed Miliband last year. He said, some people don't want Britain to borrow to invest in the green economy. They won't back down. But Keir, Rachel and I will never let this happen. Britain needs this £28 billion a year plan, and this is what we are committed to.
Well, it turns out Labour are letting it happen. They've confirmed they're scaling back almost £4 billion on this flagship environmental pledge.
Yes, Rishi Sunak has mocked Labour as having no plan. But here's what Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, told GB News earlier.
Frank, from the original commitment, there's been some substantial changes. One of those is the cost of borrowing has changed a lot. I mean, interest rates were 0.1% when that commitment was made. They're now obviously over 5%. The government themselves have spent a lot of money, and that limits the options available to a future government. And frankly, I think it is better to come out and say, we know things have changed, we've had to change some of those plans now, rather than try and do that after an election. Be straight with people. There's still a very ambitious agenda.
Well, joining us now is our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who is live for us in Westminster. Very good morning to you, Olivia. Just how damaging is this U-turn?
Well, I think the first thing to say is it is hard to overstate the importance of this U-turn. This is absolutely massive. This wasn't just Keir Starmer's green policy. It wasn't just his policy on the environment. It was essentially the flagship policy of his economic plan. What Labour have said that they wanted to do is create a green industrial revolution. And to do that, they were going to put £28 billion of funding each year behind green investment. He was planning to borrow that money for that investment. This U-turn is huge, and it's made worse by the fact that up until this week, Labour shadow ministers, including Keir Starmer himself, were standing 100% behind the plan. What seems to have happened is that in the last couple of days, now the Labour manifesto was finished off yesterday. Labour set themselves an internal deadline of finishing that manifesto by the 8th of February. And basically, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, seems to have gone to Keir Starmer and said, look, we just can't afford this. Labour have made a lot of expensive pledges in the last few months. They've promised a whole raft of pledges to do with childcare, basically free childcare for all children between the age of 9 months up until school age. They've talked about big reform of the NHS. They've said that they won't raise taxes. Well, all of that comes with a big price tag. And the £28 billion a year for the industrial green revolution has had to be sacrificed. Now, you ask how damaging this is for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer does seem to have been impacted in the polls by this. Labour have gone down by 2 points. But of course, we need to put this in perspective. Labour have been about 22 points ahead in the polls for about 6 months now. So losing 2 points isn't that bad for them. The problem, of course, is that if Keir Starmer does this again, he does have a little bit of a habit of flip-flopping, of U-turning. If he does another U-turn like this in the coming months, it might get into a situation where voters are unable to recognise how Labour is differentiating themselves from the Tories. At the moment, Keir Starmer is winning by not being the Conservatives, essentially. But the closer we get to an election, the harder that will be to hold.
I just wonder as well, Olivia, about the timing of this, because there is a suggestion that Labour knew they would be scaling back on this pledge quite a few weeks ago. It came out in the last 24 hours on what has been quite a torrid week for Rishi Sunak. You know, was it carefully timed?
I think that's a really interesting question because, as you say, rumours have been circulating for weeks, if not months now, that Labour is going to backtrack on this incredibly expensive pledge. Whether the timing was carefully orchestrated, well, I'm not sure. Yes, it's been a torrid week for Rishi Sunak, and perhaps Labour have thought that it's a good day to bury bad news. But on the other hand, allowing these briefings to circulate for so long is arguably more damaging to the Labour brand and has thrown the spotlight more fully onto what Labour has done. And Lord Blunkett, for example, Tony Blair's advisor, has said to the Times today that he thinks that this is absolutely terrible optics. The fact that Starmer waited until yesterday to actually announce that he would be rowing back from this. So whether it was carefully orchestrated or whether it simply got to a stage where Starmer and Miliband, the Shadow Energy Secretary, were fighting for this policy and Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was fighting against it. And in the end, perhaps, Rachel Reeves won the fight.
OK, Libya Utley there for us in Westminster. Thank you very much indeed. And joining us now in the studio is Conservative peer Lord Bailey. Good to see you this morning.
Morning.
What do you make of Labour axing this Green pledge? Because it's pretty remarkable this morning, even The Guardian calling it the most controversial of U-turns. Then we've seen Momentum and Unite, Labour's biggest union backers, heavily critical as well. I mean, with this, they might not have alienated, but also angered the traditional voter base.
I think there's two ways to look at this. Firstly, it's actually good politics because it is rubbish policy. We simply cannot pay for it. And actually, somebody in the Labour camp has said, look, let's be real here. We cannot charge the British public with this. So it was probably the right thing to do, I would argue. The political optics of it is showing you Keir Starmer's biggest problem. He has built a coalition of disgruntled groups, and it will be impossible to keep all of them happy. And this is just a very big example for where it's going to go wrong, because there's a number of groups who've hitched their wagon to his trailer because he said we're going to do all this green stuff, and he's upset them. There'll be a number of people who have to do around childcare. He'll upset them as well. And what he's finding is when you're in opposition years and months out from an election, life is easy. You can pledge what you want, you can say what you want, but people, as you get closer to elections, start to ask detailed questions, and he's preparing himself to answer those questions, which is grown-up politics, but it's also difficult politics.
What about the argument, though, that he didn't have a choice about scaling back this because the Conservatives, say many, say some, lots of views on this, controversial, Conservatives have trashed the economy. So, therefore, it was the sensible, pragmatic thing to do.
Look, he made these pledges when he knew the state of the economy, so that simply isn't true. And actually, the biggest thing that's affected our economy was lockdown. And he was a massive fan of lockdowns. He wanted to do more of them, and he wanted to do them for longer. So he can't really hide behind that. Having said that, the optics will work for him. He will be able to blame the Tories for almost anything. But what he has to be careful, he's using up that goodwill. And this is taking a big chunk out of it was the Tories' fault. Because ultimately, he has said to people, vote for me because this is what I'm going to do. He's no longer going to do it, so they may no longer vote for him.
So how are the Tories going to capitalise on this? I mean, I know Rishi Sunak thinks it's more flip-flopping, isn't it? And they've got no plan. That's what his claim is. And, you know, this is good for Rishi Sunak because he's had a pretty horrible week, let's face it.
His week could have been better.
Understatement.
and it is. And look, let's be fair. If you're one of the number 10 strategists, you feel like you forced this on the Labour Party because you've set a rhetoric going that they have no plan and this is unaffordable, and Labour have had to react. And they've reacted by putting down arguably their flashiest policy. And Labour have wooed a lot of young people. Labour have been able to move a lot of the left-wing vote into their stable with this set of policies, and to remove them is a fairly big win for the Conservatives. But I will say this, 2 points out of a 22-point lead is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly going to shift the polls.
If you're Starmer, you'll be feeling a little bit bad about this, but you'll look at the Parliament. Well, I'm still 20 points ahead. Don't worry about it. But the big worry is what next. If I was running the Conservative campaign, I'd be saying, OK, we've picked off that. Which are we going to pick off next? Because a problem Labour have had, they've made a lot of big funding spends. They've said, we'll do this, we'll do that. And what we all know is they cannot charge the British public anymore. We will not pay any more tax. If tax goes up, there'll be problems.
Lord Bailey, whilst we have you, wanted to ask you about Rishi Sunak, who's so far not apologised to Brianna Jai's family for the trans jibe, as it's being described, at PMQs on Wednesday. Is he right not to apologise?
One of the major tactics that the left do... Look, if you're in politics, here's how it goes. People on the right think people on the left's politics is wrong. People on the left always try to make people on the right look evil. And Rishi Sunak stamped on a rake. He walked straight into that. Because to make that joke on any other week may have well worked, because Keir Starmer could not identify a woman for people, which for most ordinary people is utterly ridiculous. But unfortunately, there is a family in who suffered the most horrific type of bereavement. And Keir Starmer has been able to manoeuvre them onto the political stage and use that against the PM. So a casual observer would say they're both in the wrong. One has made a joke that was particularly maybe could be seen as crash, and one of them has been able to make it political. But if I was running Rishi's situation, I'd say if you apologise, the pain will still be there. And you said something about Keir Starmer. You never referred to the family or that child. If I was on Keir Starmer's side, I'd say keep punching that bruise, because most people, you know, who have children, cousins, friends who are young, will be feeling slightly awkward about what has gone on. So I think never the twain will meet.
So is that, come on, you're straddling both sides here. Is that a yes or a no, Lord Bailey, about whether Rishi Sunak should come out and apologise?
Who is Keir Starmer to make Rishi apologise? As far as Rishi, I'd never apologise to Starmer. And if anybody now is shouting...
No, but should he apologise to Brianna Jai's family, to her mother, who was there?
Me, personally, I'd go and see the mother. I would take the time and go and see the mother, but I would not apologise, because he never said anything about it. He talked to Keir Starmer about Keir Starmer's actions. He didn't comment on the family and the very horrific situation is. And the reason why, because if you apologise for this, every word the PM utters, the left will be able to find some reason for him to apologise. And what they're trying to do is frame the PM as a bad man. And I personally, if I was a PM, would not allow that to happen.
Do you think that Keir Starmer politicised that joke where it didn't need to be, or do you think it was valid?
100% he politicised it. But he was given the ammo. I'd love to say to you that Rishi didn't give him the ammo, but he did. And Rishi knows if there's one thing about the Labour Party, they campaign aggressively, and the left-wing press do personal attacks on a level that the rest of the world cannot compete with.
Well, the right-wing press are quite good at doing attacks as well.
Yeah, they are quite good, but the left-wing press are superb. They're superb. It is their stock and trade. I mean, just ask J.K. Rowling, she'll tell you.
Interesting. Lord Bailey, thank you very
so
much
indeed. What I noticed as well, actually, wasn't just that, Ellie, was that there was a number of MPs who were reacting to it and having this very discussion, and they couldn't get the surname correct of the family, and they kept saying Brianna Gray, and it's Brianna Jai, and I found that very disrespectful when you're talking about a family going through so much, girl who was murdered, and you cannot even say her name correctly, her surname.
No, very, very uncomfortable. Do let us know what you think about that. Do you think Rishi Sunak should have apologised? Do we think he was right not to have done so? gbnews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us. Still to come, we're going to have a pretty extraordinary story about an illegal migrant who says he feels trapped in the UK and he can't get back home. We'll have more on that on Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and it's clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Peter Andre. Join myself and Ellie Costello this Saturday morning on Saturday Morning Live, where we have a very special guest. Yeah, she just happens to be my wife.
I am so excited to join you guys, and yes, I'll be talking all about my new book, teaching kids how to maintain good mental health as they grow up.
Dr. Emily, she's an NHS doctor and an author, and she's written this amazing book, Healthy Mind, Happy You. So, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. See you then. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is coming up to 10:26. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ellie Costello and Pip Thompson.
Now, we often report on migrants trying to get into Britain, but one 25-year-old Syrian says he is desperate to get out.
Alar Eldin has been sleeping under an upturned rowing boat on a beach in Kent and says he is trapped here despite having his asylum claim rejected.
Yes, the Home Office said this in response. They say if an individual does not have the right to be in the UK, we will make every effort to return them to their country of origin or a safe third country.
Joining us now is international human rights lawyer David Haig. Very good morning to you, David. This is interesting, isn't it? Because we talk so much about people coming into Britain, whether it's illegally or legally, but yet here is somebody saying he wants to leave and he can't. Why can't he?
Good morning to you both. I mean, it certainly sounds absurd with all the issues and the problems that we've got. I don't think this is a case that we see an awful lot, and I think we need to look into the facts of this one specifically. Now, what's happened with this chap is that eventually his asylum claim was struck out, so he should have been, as you said earlier on, sent back to his country of origin or a safe third country. Now, that hasn't happened. Why is that? And I think the details in this case are a little bit thin on the ground. I mean, obviously that's something that should happen, and this chap clearly has fallen through the gaps. But what it shows you is that the system really is broken. So not only can we stop people coming in, we can't even get people going out. And even if these numbers are few of people in his situation, it really isn't acceptable. You know, we're not, even when we look at this chap, he's living, he claims, under a boat. That's hardly where he should be living in this situation.
David, how common is this for people coming to this country, if they don't like it or they don't settle in for whatever reason? How common is it that they would want to go back home or to another safe country? And when they do feel that way, how easy is it to get them there?
I think the second question is the easiest one to answer. I don't think it's that common, the situation that we're seeing now. I think there are people that get stuck in between in the system, and effectively what would happen when someone is rejected, that person there's a deportation process that starts. Usually, if somebody wants to go back, that should be a lot easier. People will fall through the cracks. The system isn't ideal by any means. And that's, I think, what happened in the case of this chap. In terms of people, I think, that want to go back if they're rejected, and add into that people that are looking at asylum coming here, genuine asylum seekers, what I'm seeing from the genuine asylum seekers, because of all the vilification of the word asylum seeker, you're seeing a lot of people, perhaps not a lot, I'd say people are now looking twice at whether they want to come here because of what they'll suffer, because of all the vilification that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, and the Home Office say that they will make every effort to return the person to their country of origin. But then what would be going on here? Because this gentleman's saying he's got no choice but to jump on the back of a lorry.
Well, I think this is like I said, it seems that we're missing some facts here when I was looking at this case, because if his asylum case has basically been rejected and he's due to be sent back, there would be a process in place where he would be sent back. Now, that's not necessarily immediate, because obviously they have to find a place where they can send him that is safe. And as where he came from, obviously, I think this chap is Syrian, isn't deemed safe, so he can't go back there. But where could he go? So there's logistics there, and there's also logistics in moving someone. But there would be a process. So if this chap is going to the police and saying, put me through that process, I'd find it very odd if they're just saying, no, go sleep under a boat until we're ready for you. It does seem very odd that the Home Office and the police haven't gone through that process. So I think it's quite strange. But what it appears from reports he's trying to do, he's trying to deport, as odd as this sounds, he's trying to deport himself illegally from the UK by jumping on the backs of lorries and doing that. Now, of course, that's illegal as well. So the police are quite right stopping people doing that, because whatever nationality you are, we don't want people jumping on the backs of lorries or under trains to get out of this country, because that obviously puts everyone at risk. So you've got this absurd situation. And I think now that it's been highlighted, I would imagine that, well, one would hope that the Home Office and the police are taking this seriously. And, we may want to start looking at, how many other people are in this situation? It's not one that I've come across a lot, but clearly if this chap's to be believed, then it's an issue.
Well, it does certainly sound as if the man in question has fallen through the cracks. But, I mean, the Home Office has said they're going to make every effort to return any person who does not have the right to be in the UK, return them to their country of origin or a safe third country. Who foots the bill for that? Well,
Effectively, we do, the British taxpayer. So people, there's no real way or no effective way that we, the British taxpayer, and our authorities can essentially bill people that fail that process, and we send them back. So if you've got a flight, for instance, an extradition flight, whilst they may try and reclaim that money, basically it's us, the British taxpayer, that pays the money, not just obviously when someone comes here and maintaining them, but when we send them back.
OK, David Hay, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Still to come, park runners are furious as all of their course records have been wiped after controversy of a trans female having the fastest time in the female category.
Are you a park runner? Let us know what you think about this. It's causing quite a stir. That and much more after your morning news with Sophia Wensler.
Pip, thank you. From the GB Newsroom at 10:30, your headlines. US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed the material back immediately. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
There's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
And Russia's president has told TV presenter Tucker Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the Ukraine war. Asked if he could imagine a scenario in which he would send Russian troops to Poland, he said only if Poland attacks Russia. He went on to say that Russia has no interest in Poland, Latvia or anywhere else. In his first interview sitting down with a Western journalist since Russia's invasion, Putin also said he has no interest in speaking with the US president until certain demands are met. Tesco has announced the sale of its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth around £600 million. Barclays is to take over Tesco's bank's credit cards, loans and savings accounts and has also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. The retailer says the deal will help it trim its debts and allow it to be focused on core retail business. 2,800 Tesco employees are to be transferred to Barclays under the agreement over the time. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to the gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2606 and €1.1712. The price of gold is £1,661 and 19 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,599 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thanks, Sophia. Lots more still to come, including all this furore about parkrun. But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we are looking at the success of British manufacturing right around the country.
PP Control and Automation are an electrical control system builder. Now, they've had a record year. So, Tony, what's behind this growth? And also, why are you so integral to UK manufacturing?
Our business produces control and automation systems that go onto machinery. The machinery is used to make everything we buy, everything that we touch, everything that we see. So our company is supplying automation into companies that will make machines that could milk cows, that could cut metal, that could put labels on fruit, that could put meat in trays. So everything we do is really affecting that ability of people to want and buy things and how things happen.
So why have you had such a successful year then?
We're seeing the growth of automation across many sectors now. We need to invest in automation, as I said before, and there are skill shortages now that also exist. So certain processes that used to be done by people are now being done by machines.
So what is it you as a company are doing then?
We're investing ourselves, so although we talk about automation, we need to invest ourselves. We've spent over £2 million investing in automation for certain parts of our processes, and we're working with customers really to promote automation into new sectors.
So then what is it that you're doing with regards to automation?
Well, in addition to promoting automation to other industries, we're investing heavily in automation ourselves. So we've invested over £2 million in automation for cable manufacture and test. That's enabling us to scale and work with some really exciting companies in some really exciting new sectors, such as ESG, hydrogen and renewables. Now, that's really important for us as a business. It's really important for those companies, and ultimately it's helping us scale and grow ourselves. So our own investment is helping us help those companies grow and develop.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it, as you know, Eamon. You can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category is just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this. at my old employer being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
I would just point out you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:40. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Pip Thompson and me, Ellie Costello. And joining us this morning are political commentators Matthew Stadlin and Emma Webb to get stuck into all of the top stories of the day. Emma, let's start with you, shall we? And Parkrun. There's some controversy this morning as Parkrun has removed records of gender, courses and ages from its events. Tell us a bit more about this.
So, as we were just discussing before we came on air, it's actually a little unclear from the reporting on this exactly what Parkrun have decided to do, whether they've just removed the comparison of gender categories or whether they've removed other categories as well, or whether they've removed all of their records altogether. But this is part of the ongoing debate about trans women in sports, so biological men competing against biological women. I think that the issue here, and the point has been made already on this channel this morning, that the Parkrun isn't particularly competitive. It's not like it's the Olympics. But the reality is that if women don't know that whether they're competing against a record set by a biological man or a biological female, that could be very demotivating for women wanting to take part, wanting to try and improve their own records, and not really having an understanding of where they stand. So, for example, you can imagine if you're competing against somebody who, say, you're trying to compete within an age category, if you didn't know whether those sort of people were able to identify as any age that they liked, then you wouldn't know where you really stood in relation to those records. And so I think that despite the fact that it's obviously not competitive, it's not as competitive, it's not like the Olympics, it's still part of the same ongoing problem of biological women being discouraged really from taking part in sports because they're having to compete against biological men.
There's a former elite marathon runner, Matthew, who's been getting on social media about this, and she says a trans-identifying male who runs in the female category at Parkrun is currently ranked in the top 10 women in his age group in the UK on Run Britain, with a handicap comprised entirely of parkruns. It's wrong, it's unfair, and it must end.
Yeah, so I'm completely, well, I was going to say completely, I am, as you might expect, in favour of inclusivity. And
I thought you were also going to say, I am a park runner.
Sadly not. I think the closest I ever came to a park run was I did a run in a park with Kevin Hart, the comedian.
Oh, did you?
I was interviewing him. He made me chuckle along the way. Anyway.
Oh, that's a great story.
No, so my position on this, I hope, is quite clear. In favour of inclusivity, but also defensive of women's rights. So where there is a genuine clash, not a sort of transphobic storm, but a genuine clash between the rights of trans people and the rights of women, that should be taken seriously. And it seems to me obvious, maybe wrong about it, but it seems to me obvious that people who are biologically male should not be competing in any sport with people who are biologically female.
Can't they just have their own category?
Indeed, I cannot see the problem with that. And that isn't to other trans people. It's not to say, you know, you're sort of inferior or anything. No. Just as we... And this is not to say that trans people are disabled. I want to be absolutely clear. But we have Disability Olympics, don't we? And those are celebrated, and they're a positive thing. You think back to 2012 when we had the London Paralympic Games held here. That was hugely well supported, hugely well watched on TV, full stadium at the London Stadium and so forth. So this doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be at the heart of a cultural one. I will just say this as well, given we're talking about trans issues. I thought that Rishi Sunak's jibe at PMQs this week was disgusting. It was un-prime ministerial. It was deliberately playing into a sort of transphobic atmosphere. He's the leader of this country. He should be a leader for all of us. He knew exactly what he was doing, regardless of who was in the gallery. But on the issue of sport, it seems to me absurd that women such as yourselves should be running against people, even if they identify as women, who are biologically male.
OK. Oh, well, I want to keep talking about this. Well, as a park runner, I find it a motivator to see these sorts of records that you get sent because you try and better yourself every week. But then, on the other hand, the school of thought is, look, it's a bit of fun. You're not competing. The only person you're competing against is yourself.
As someone who's not a park runner, if I knew that parkrun were allowing biological men to just self-identify as women and then compete against women, I wouldn't be interested. I wouldn't want to go and be part of the parkrun.
There are plenty of people now saying they're boycotting parkrun.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because we've heard this conversation at elite level and an elite level of sport for a very long time, but it's now affecting, or is it going to affect, everyday people, everyday women? Will it demotivate people to take part in parkrun? Let us know what you think. GBNews@gbnews.com.
Will it make you go for the first time?
Will it make you go for the first time? Can never been up that early on a Saturday, I can safely say. Or I'm at work, either way. Stay with us. We're going to be back very shortly talking about Prince Harry, because he's been speaking at a glitzy awards ceremony in Las Vegas. But he didn't mention his father, the King, who, of course, just started cancer treatment. We're asking, was it a snub? Matthew and Emma will have their say on that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity, when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do, I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So, of course, feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually, I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. With us still our political commentators Matthew Stadlen and Emma Webb. And let's talk about Prince Harry, because, you know, we haven't spoken about him for the last, 20 minutes? Should we have a quick chat? Emma, he has been... Well, he was made this dash from California to London, was here for all of 25 hours, flew back again, and he's now... has been in Las Vegas at an awards do.
It's terribly ecologically friendly of him to fly all the way over for 24 hours. On his visit to the King, it was interesting that he came only for 24 hours. He had police escort, I think, to Clarence House, but not on the way back to Heathrow. And he stayed in a hotel rather than at a royal residence, although that may be because he didn't give enough notice in advance of his visit. Some people have suggested that maybe this is indicative of a thawing of the relationship between him and Charles. But it's interesting that he stayed only for 24 hours. I don't think in this speech at Las Vegas, I don't think we should expect that he would mention anything about his
that's
father.
what's been picked up on, isn't it? That contrast between Prince William at the London Air Ambulance charity dinner, where he thanked everybody for their good wishes, and Prince Harry has remained absolutely stum, and which he is entitled to do.
And I also think that that's possibly what we might like.
And makes a change for Prince Harry, doesn't it?
If anything, I mean, in order to retrieve his relationship with his family, he needs to keep his mouth shut. So what William did was was dignified, and what you would expect also of the heir. But for Prince Harry, I think it would have been an inappropriate context as well for him to mention it, because it's obviously not in the UK, it's in the States. And so I think actually maybe it's a good sign that he hasn't opened his mouth and spoken about it to anyone.
And if he's trying to rebuild bridges, perhaps...
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the best thing to do, yeah.
Look, we want to get onto this story.
Am I not allowed to come back?
You come back to that very quickly,
Just very quickly.
I do want to talk about inclusion.
Just very quickly.
Because you care about inclusion.
I do. This is a media feeding frenzy. I cannot believe we've got to the point within the space of a few days. I was here live when the news came out about King Charles. This is a story about our king having cancer and trying to sort of empathise with him and the implications of that has for our country and for the monarchy. And here we are talking about Prince Harry, who did the decent thing as his son and flew over
But
to
maybe
see
we
him.
might not be talking about it quite so much if Prince Harry hadn't written a book trashing his family.
That is a fair point.
Thank you, Matthew.
and a Netflix series as well. Do you think it's right, then, that he stayed tight-lipped on this? On his father at the speech last night in Las Vegas?
I do.
Didn't mention his father.
Yeah, I think that they would have been out of context if he's making a sort of funny, jokey speech at a sort of show-busy event to then start talking about the very serious diagnosis that his father and our king has received this week.
Right, let's get on to this inclusivity training story, shall we, Matthew? In the Telegraph, apparently it's about a bat charity, Emma was telling us a little bit earlier on.
Well, Emma, you're just desperate to talk about this, aren't you?
I find it so amusing that I mean, it's one of many stories of its kind, but it's just particularly amusing because it's about inclusivity in relation to bats.
Yeah,
You're right.
I don't think it's about the bats. It's about inclusivity and environmentalism in the countryside. We had earlier this week, didn't we, the story that there's this perception of the countryside of being racist. And when you look at a story like this, particularly when they talk about anti-oppression training, most of us sort of sit up and think this is absurd. And then you start to look a little bit more deeply into it. And if you take the countryside may well be the preserve largely of white people. And if that is the case, we want to change it because we want to be inclusive. We want British Asian, British Black and so forth citizens to have access to the beauty spots in our countryside that the rest of us enjoy and perhaps take for granted. So once you sort of peel back some of the layers that initially seem absurd, I think you get to something perhaps a little bit more serious.
No, I think I think this is silliness. Actually, when you dig into it, I think it's silliness because if you think about where the majority of ethnic minorities live in this country, it's within the big cities, within urban areas. And actually, probably, if you looked at a breakdown of white Britons living in those places as well, they also are less likely, I imagine, to go to the countryside, partly because of transport reasons, maybe not having family in the countryside and therefore not having a reason to visit the countryside or to explore a certain area. And I just think it's just it's not right. It's offensive in a way, and it's just simply not accurate, as this has described the British countryside as a racist colonial white space. It's nonsense, and we've seen so many stories about decolonising the countryside.
I was talking to a black lady who'd moved to the Cotswolds, who had lived in London, and she said she suffered far more racism in London than she ever has.
Well, also, you have to, as well, have to recognise that within London, and we can talk about ethnic minorities as if they're some kind of homogenous blob, but the reality is there are conflicts between groups within London. So I just think that it's silliness, and back conservation charities don't need to be giving inclusivity training to their staff.
OK, Emma Webb, Matthew Sadler, really good to see you. Do let us know your thoughts on that story, gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because in the next few moments, US President Joe Biden has dismissed accusations that he is no longer fit for office. We're going to be talking about that in the next few moments on Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A milder day out there for large parts of the country, but still cold enough in Scotland for some snow and ice this morning. Met Office warnings remain in place, but the wintry weather over northern England is, well, slowly turning a bit milder. So it's grey and it's dank, but it's not quite as cold as yesterday. Far northwest of Scotland may well stay dry, and there'll be drier spells further south, but there will also be quite a few showers coming through. Bit of sunshine, though. Could see temperatures getting up to 11, 12, maybe even 13 Celsius. Further north, closer to average, but generally milder than yesterday. Still cold, though, with this brisk and bitter easterly wind blowing across eastern and then northern Scotland tonight. And as the wet weather moves northwards, there will be more snow coming in here. Again, mostly over hills. Some of the higher routes won't be very pleasant through this evening. Met Office yellow warning in place for snow and ice here. Further south, temperatures should remain a few degrees above freezing and generally turning drier through the night as well. So a bright start to Saturday across the Midlands and eastern England. Still wet and windy across northern parts of Scotland. Should dry up through the day across the central belt. Elsewhere, we'll see showers coming into the southwest. So South Wales, southwest England, seeing fairly frequent showers during tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, say many places having a bright, fine Saturday, and it's steadily turning milder, although still feeling cold in the far north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl, in her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Friday the 9th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Pip Thompson and me, Ellie Costello.
Green Plan axed. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says she will not apologise for showing fiscal responsibility after Labour scraps its £28 billion Green Pledge. Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, has more.
Yes, Keir Starmer's green industrial revolution is on the scrap heap and Labour grandees aren't happy about it at all. Find out more with me very soon.
Putin blasts Boris. Speaking to former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
Would have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
Fit for office, a special counsel investigation into the handling of classified documents says US President Joe Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. But Mr. Biden dismisses it.
I'm well-meaning and I'm an elderly man and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Parkrun outrage. Some runners across Britain are furious as Parkrun has removed all records from its website. It's in response to the backlash they received for trans women holding the fastest times in female categories.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is to appear exclusively on GB News People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. This is what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Well, if you missed that, on Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in the special People's Forum live on GB News in the north-east of England. Over the course of the hour, he's going to take questions directly from you. So if you want to be there, you can head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today, or you can scan the QR code on your screens now.
And there's plenty been getting you going this morning. Plenty more to come as well. GB views at gbnews.com, including whether we should have our locks chopped off.
I think so.
Here's someone else with long locks. It's Sophia Wensler with your headlines.
Thanks, Pip. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. The US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed the material back immediately. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
US President Joe Biden speaking there. Now, Russia's president has told TV presenter Tucker Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war in Ukraine. Asked if he could imagine a scenario in which he would send Russian troops to Poland, he said only if Poland attacks Russia. He went on to say that Russia has no interest in Poland, Latvia or anywhere else. In his first interview sitting down with a Western journalist since Russia's invasion, Putin also said he has no interest in speaking with the US president until certain demands are met. And Rishi Sunak says claims Putin made during the interview, blaming the West and NATO for the war, are ridiculous.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
However, Kira Rudik, a member of Ukraine's parliament and leader of the Golos party, says Putin does not want peace and does not want to negotiate.
I have heard his narratives. There is nothing new there. He is threatening to destroy the world and saying that Ukraine is not a nation at all. But what is most important, he is trying to persuade all the viewers that he is ready for negotiations. Well, I can tell you this is a lie. I think it will be very dangerous because this interview would definitely try to influence the next US elections. And not the way they were trying to influence the elections beforehand, but in a very open way.
In other news, Tesco has announced the sale of its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth around £600 million. Barclays is to take over Tesco Bank's credit cards, loans and saving accounts and has also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. Tesco will receive an income for the use of its brand and Barclays will participate in the Tesco Club Card scheme, the UK's largest loyalty programme. The retailer says the deal will help it trim its debts and allow it to focus on core retail business. 2,800 Tesco employees are to be transferred to Barclays under the agreement over time. The Met Police is failing to tackle child exploitation, leaving vulnerable youngsters at risk. That's according to a watchdog. New findings say the force's response to criminal and sexual exploitation of children was not currently effective, and not enough was being done to protect victims. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services raised serious concerns about the force's performance after more than half of the investigations examined were graded as inadequate. The Met apologised to children and families it had let down and stressed that it was taking urgent and significant steps so no child is left unsafe. And British Airways says it plans to resume flights to and from Israel at the beginning of April. In a statement on their website, the airline says they will resume flights to Tel Aviv, but with a much reduced service from London Heathrow. British Airways suspended services to Tel Aviv amid the growing hostilities between Israel and Hamas following the attack by the terror group on October 7th. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Just want to bring you some breaking news that we're getting, and that is junior doctors are going on strike again. This time from February the 24th to February the 28th, so 5-day strike. This has come from the British Medical Association in the last few moments.
It is this ongoing dispute over pay and conditions. We last saw junior doctors walk out for 6 days in England in January. It was the longest stoppage in the history of the NHS. And at the time, the BMA and the government said they would be willing to return to the table after that strike action took place. So it's not clear yet whether those discussions have broken down. But as soon as we have more details on that, we will bring it to you here on Britain's Newsroom. But that breaking news...
We're actually, Ellie, sorry to interrupt, we are getting a statement from the British Medical Association, which is saying the government had failed to meet the deadline to put an improved pay offer on the table. In a show of goodwill, says the statement, the BMA provided the Health Secretary with an option to delay further strike action. She was asked, this is Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, to extend the current strike mandate for a short period and allow talks to continue with the aim to achieve a resolution for this year's dispute. Disappointingly, she declined to agree to extending the mandate. The BMA... there is a chink of light. The BMA say the strikes could still be called off if a credible offer is made. If we get anything from the Health Secretary on that, we will bring it to you here on GB News.
Yeah, but that breaking news this morning that junior doctors will go on strike from February the 24th to February the 28th. That's from the British Medical Association. Now, lots of you have been emailing in this morning. Thank you so much for your company. Lots of you getting in touch on the idea of, well, Labour's U-turn, shall we start with that, on the Green Pledge, the £28 billion Green Pledge. Brian says, in reality, it should be scaled back totally, as it's not even necessary in many people's eyes.
Yeah, and I've got plenty in front of me on this parkrun. I was going to say parkrun business. Are you a park runner? Do you do that 5K every Saturday morning?
If you are, hats off to you.
Yeah.
Including you.
It's causing quite a furore because parkrun is removing all gender, course and age records from its website. It's amid this row over trans women athletes, people who identify as trans women, holding the fastest times. Christopher, you say you're a park runner and you're generally against all of the self-ID in sport nonsense, but it is probably the right decision to abandon the rankings because the very ethos of parkrun is inclusivity. But you do agree with me that it's really nice to try and see your records to beat your times.
Yeah, and it is a shame, personally, I can imagine, not that I'm a park runner, but I can imagine, if you were, that it's quite nice to see your time improve each week, just personally to be able to see that. So for that to be removed,
But does it need to be on the website? Because you get the emails,
So you'd still find out your time, it just wouldn't be ranked. Is that the way it would be?
Yeah, that's how I understand it. Right. Chris, you say, well, they've mucked this up, haven't they? How to alienate over 50% of the population in one fell swoop. Reinstate all at once and accept that women's rights should not be trampled by anyone.
And Jules says it's another case of wiping women from sport. As for wiping the records, what an analogy. Well, do keep them coming in. Do you want to get onto the hair ones, or should we leave that for another time?
Well, we've had quite a few on the hair because I can't even remember.
We had a sassy email earlier, didn't we?
Yeah, we did have a sassy email telling us we should get our long locks cut. Susan, and I've invited Susan to come on the show and speak to us both about this and give us your views. Lots of you in reply have said that
being
our
very
hair's
lovely,
just fine.
and thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm not being funny, but when there's so much to talk about on the news agenda, you know, you've got this interview between Tucker Carlson and Putin. You've got everything that's happening. Yeah, all the politics, and it's about our hair.
Yeah, it's a shame. It always comes down to the hair.
Yeah, so let's move swiftly
on. If you
on.
have to be that angry about hair, it's actually just very sad, really.
Yeah, but Susan, have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, and best wishes to you, and lots of love, because I think you might need it. gbviews@gbnews.com. Do keep the views coming in. Keep them nice if you can, and polite. Now, Labour are facing...
never happen.
No. Labour are facing criticism after ditching its pledge to spend £28 billion a year on green projects.
They're scaling back almost £4 billion on the flagship policy. £4 billion at least, I think. So let's hear Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's reaction to the U-turn.
I think what Labour announced yesterday just demonstrates what we've been saying, is they absolutely don't have a plan. Their signature economic policy is in tatters, and when you don't have a plan, you can't deliver any change for the country. In contrast, our plan is working. If you look at what's happening with the economy, inflation has come down from 11% to 4%, mortgage rates are starting to come down, wages are rising, and because of that, we've been able to start cutting people's taxes. So someone earning £35,000 is getting a tax cut of £450 kicked in January. That shows that when you have a plan, you can make a difference, and if we stick to our plan, I can give everyone the peace of mind that the future is going to be better. And as we saw yesterday, the alternative is the Labour Party, who have no plan, and that means no change and just going back to square one.
Well, here's what Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, told GB News earlier.
Frank, from the original commitment, there's been some substantial changes. One of those is the cost of borrowing has changed a lot. I mean, interest rates were 0.1% when that commitment was made. They're now obviously over 5%. The government themselves have spent a lot of money, and that limits the options available to a future government. And frankly, I think it is better to come out and say, we know things have changed, we've had to change some of those plans now, rather than try and do that after an election, be straight with people. There's still a very ambitious agenda.
Well, joining us now is our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. Labour, then, they're facing so much criticism after this U-turn, including, you know, criticism from very much within their own party.
Well, absolutely, Pip. And I think first it's important to say it's very hard to overstate the significance of this U-turn from Keir Starmer. This £28 billion a year for green projects was obviously an environmental policy, but it was also the cornerstone, really, of Labour's economic plan, this green industrial revolution that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have been talking about for years now. And in many respects, it was the one big policy which differentiated Labour from the Conservatives. And now we have seen a 100% U-turn. Instead of £28 billion per year, Labour has promised to invest £23.4 billion, I think it is, over the course of 5 years. And just to put into perspective what that'll mean for people at home, part of the Labour plan was to insulate 19 million houses. That's now going to be 5 million houses, scaled back by 80%. And as you say, there is a lot of consternation from within Labour itself. And that's mostly about the timing of this announcement. There are those who say that, yes, they accept that essentially this plan had just got far too expensive. Labour have made lots of other very expensive pledges in recent months. And most people in Labour seem to think that scaling back this policy, this green policy now, was the only way to meet the price tags for some of those other Labour pledges without raising taxes. But there is a lot of disagreement about the timing. It has been rumoured for months now that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are going to row back on this policy. But as recently as Tuesday, Keir Starmer himself was pushing back against those rumours and saying that he was standing by the plan. U-turning now, after all of that has already gone under the water, puts Labour very, very much in the spotlight. And Lord Blunkett, Labour grandee, Tony Blair advisor, says that the optics look very, very bad indeed. Obviously, we need to put this into perspective a little bit, because Labour has been 20, 22, 24, I think, at some points ahead in the polls. And yes, this will have an impact, but it's not going to create a huge dent. It's not going to be a deal breaker for Keir Starmer, but it really isn't a good look. And the fact that people like Lord Blunkett are saying so isn't a very good sign for the Labour leader.
No, the optics aren't good, are they, Olivia? I mean, who is the architect of this U-turn, do you think? Is it Sir Keir Starmer or is it Rachel Reeves? Because if it's Rachel Reeves, she could bind the hands of a Labour government for the whole of the next term, could she not? And would-be Labour voters will be worried about that. They're worried that what we're seeing today, decisions like this, will become more tricky and more frequent under a Labour government.
I think that's a really important question, Ellie. Who was the architect of this? Because it certainly wasn't Ed Miliband, who's the Shadow Energy Secretary. 7 months ago, he said that he tweeted saying there was pressure on the Labour leadership to back down on its £28 billion plan. But he said, and I quote, "Keir and I will never let that happen." That's pretty embarrassing for the Shadow Energy Secretary today. And as I say, Keir Starmer himself was saying that he was loyal to the plan right up until Tuesday, which leaves the only option really was that it was Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, who it sounds as though she's been looking at the book, she's been looking at some of the pledges that Labour has made over the last few months. Very expensive promise for childcare, for instance, expensive reforms of the NHS, etc. And she's added up the numbers and decided that this plan simply doesn't work anymore. And she, it seems, has told Keir Starmer that now is the time for Labour to do this U-turn. And obviously that's led to lots of people within the Labour Party suggesting, behind the scenes, that perhaps Starmer doesn't really have a solid grip on his own party.
OK, Olivia Utley there for us in Westminster. Thank you very much indeed.
Joining us now in the studio is political commentator John Oxley. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Just want to start with this breaking news we're getting in the last few moments that junior doctors are striking again later this month because they are saying the Health Secretary has rejected its gesture of goodwill.
Yeah, so these talks have been going on for quite some time. We saw quite a few strikes from the junior doctors last year.
Last month
even, sort of running into this year. And I think the Health Secretary was hoping to get this dealt with, but there's not a lot of goodwill between the parties there. If you look at some of the British Medical Association elections and things, the doctors are getting even more militant, sort of more pro-strike candidates being elected. And, I don't think there's a huge movement on the side of the government there. And, what we're seeing is those talks are starting to break down, and another strike is the biggest weapon in the union's arsenal, so they're going to deploy it when they think it's most useful.
I mean, what we saw with the last strike action from the junior doctors in January was the government were refusing to meet them while strike action was taking place. Do you think that was the right call from the government, not to meet them whilst the strike was ongoing? Because you'd almost want to see both sides just coming around the table and finally hashing this out. I mean, we're talking right now about another reballot and getting a further mandate for even more strike action. And all the while, we're seeing the waiting list just get longer and longer and longer.
Absolutely. I think it was probably a bad call from the government because the junior doctors sort of striking is the biggest thing they can do. And if you're saying to them, we're only going to meet with you if you don't have a strike, that doesn't really encourage them to give up that leverage that they have. And I think that's what you're seeing, and the doctors are becoming more determined on this. And as you say, that's having huge repercussions for the NHS.
And I think there was maybe a lot of optimism when Victoria Atkins became Health Secretary. I mean, not that long ago, was it? But maybe people were thinking she might have a different approach, a different kind of diplomacy with this. And it hasn't really happened.
No, it hasn't at all. So that's always one of those things that people get tunnel vision when they're locked into these disputes, and sometimes having a new person come in, they can have a new approach. But seemingly, really, it's coming from government that they are going to try and stare down these doctors and that they are going to push a harder line, and that's what we're seeing. And at the moment, it seems the doctors are pushing back. Because, of course, the other thing to remember is if you're one of these doctors, you're thinking, well, another 6-7 months or so, we will have a Labour government to deal with. They'll want to get this sorted. And so that time pressure is probably flowing into their thinking as well.
A glimmer of hope in all of this. The BMA said the strikes could be called off if a credible offer is made. How likely do you think that is to happen, John?
I think it's unlikely. I think that the BMA, the junior doctors, are asking quite a lot to, they say, sort of make up for cuts to junior doctor pay that have happened not just recently, not just in the face of the current inflation, but going back sort of all through austerity. The government keeps saying they're not going to go much higher than the offers they've already made, which are more generous than the normal pay increase, but nothing like what the junior doctors say. And I think also at the moment it looks very weak if the immediate response to this is to make a big offer. And the government have to worry as well that they've got other unions involved, both in the medical profession and across the board. And if the junior doctors get a big result out of the striking, is that only going to encourage more strikes across the public sector where these pay disputes are going on?
Completely different topic, but just briefly, did you dip into that interview between Tucker Carlson and Putin? What did you think? I mean, Rishi Sunak's come out today saying it's clearly ridiculous for Putin to blame the West for the Ukraine war. I mean, should Putin have had that platform?
I think it's a very dangerous thing to give someone who is essentially one of our enemies a fairly gentle interview. We know when Western news agencies that are more robust, like the BBC, ask, the Kremlin always says no. And there is something, a bit, almost treacherous.
Was it uncomfortable viewing, did you think?
I think so. This is someone who is committing a genocide in Ukraine, is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians potentially, has also invaded Georgia 10 years ago, on our own soil in Britain, has used nerve agents to kill people. That is not someone we should be doing sort of ordinary business with and giving a fawning interview for. And it really, I think, plays down the danger that has entirely come from Russian aggression, both in Europe and elsewhere.
And of course, he would deny, as you would expect, committing genocide. He denies, doesn't he, that it's an invasion?
Yes.
It's denazification, he says.
But, what we see is those, bombed-out cities in the south and the east of Ukraine, pretty much speak for themselves.
And I'm not sure he was asked much about that.
No.
OK, John Oxley, thanks so much.
You.
Thank you. Stay with us. Still to come, more on those shocking claims made by President Putin in that bombshell interview with Tucker Carlson. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the crossings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boats, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
They can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Welcome back. It is 11:27 to be precise. You are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ellie Costello and Pip Thompson.
Now, overnight, Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused former Prime Minister Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
Well, let him cancel his decree and enter into negotiations. We have never refused. And the fact that they obeyed the demand or persuasion of Mr. Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, seems ridiculous and very sad to me. Because, as Mr. Arakamiya put it, we could have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
Joining us now is the chair for Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Hello to you, Greg. Good to have you on Britain's Newsroom. Thanks for talking to us. Many people will have been absolutely fascinated by that interview. How fascinated were you?
Well, I think it was a really timely interview. I think people have been wanting to hear from Putin for 2 years now, and good for Tucker Carlson for it being able to get the interview. And you can make the argument that the media should not give Putin a platform, but on the other hand, I think it's much better to allow dialogue. And I thought that Tucker did a good job of not fawning on Putin, not making it like a pro-Putin interview. He asked the questions. Sometimes the answers weren't what we wanted to hear, but I think it was still a good move to do that.
Do you think it was a challenging enough interview for President Putin? Was he held to account enough by Tucker Carlson, especially regarding war crimes in Ukraine? Because even the Kremlin spokesperson this week admitted that Tucker Carlson had been handpicked because of his Moscow-friendly position on the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And I think there's that argument that, of course, we all wanted Tucker Carlson to push him. I thought he did a great job inquiring about Evan Gershkovich, who's a Wall Street Journal reporter that's been held, who's been held in Russia for over a year. And so, I thought he did have his moments, but look, the way he got the interview, he probably had to agree to some terms. And that's just the way that these interviews work. And, I think back to when mainstream media was interviewing people like the Ayatollah in Iran. Nobody really likes that person, but it's important to get those interviews and to have some exposure. So, yeah, we all wish that Tucker could have been more aggressive, but that's just wasn't possible with the terms of the interview. So, and I know that other outlets have been trying to get interviews with Putin. Yes, did he picked Tucker Carlson because he probably thought he might be a little bit more open-minded than someone who would be extremely hostile or one-sided on being overly, pro-Ukraine. We know that Tucker has had some criticisms about Ukraine and about, some of the leadership there. But I think, you have to keep in mind that, this is in the context of American voters who view, the money going to, or at least that's proposed to go to Ukraine, and money that has gone to Ukraine in the context of what's going on the American border. So I think it's healthy that Tucker asks those questions in the context of the open border, which is really now the top issue for American voters.
OK, Greg, I just want to move very quickly on to something else very interesting, which is President Biden, that special counsel report, which has led to Biden defending his memory. Just before we ask you about it, let's just hear what President Biden said.
There's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president.
This is all a bit of a gift for you, isn't it, Greg?
Yeah, it's painful to watch, and it's sad to see. We all have relatives, elderly relatives who have gone through this. I wouldn't even call it early stage dementia anymore. And the anger, the bitterness that President Biden shows is just another sign of that. This was a really bad moment for him, and for the Democrats. And in many ways, I'm here in New York. This overshadowed the Tucker Putin interview in many ways. I mean, the headlines here in both the, op-ed pages as well as the front pages are all about Biden. He's not fit to be president if he's not fit to be prosecuted. So, this was in many ways a gift. Yes, a gift for Republicans, but also a gift for Biden, the fact that he's not going to face any charges with this indictment by Robert Hur, or lack of indictment. So, this was just not a good moment for President Biden. It shows, if anything, it's elder abuse, but it really, I think, exposes that the Democrats knew this as far back as 2017. That's pretty clear. So what they did in 2020 really was a fraud, keeping him in the basement and running the campaign like that. It was just deceitful, and it's a shame that it happened to the American people.
OK, Greg Swenson, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Sophia Wensler now has your news headlines.
Thanks, Ellie. It's 11:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of the Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with the US President Biden unless certain demands are met. Rishi Sunak vowed the UK's continued support of Ukraine.
Clearly ridiculous. Russia conducted an illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. I'm proud that the UK has stood strongly with Ukraine from the beginning. I was there earlier this year, the first foreign leader to visit. It was my first visit of the year to announce significant military support to Ukraine and also a broader security relationship with them. We can't let this type of behaviour go unchecked. It impacts all of our security. We've already seen the impact it had on everyone's energy bills.
Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Junior doctors will go on strike again later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they will walk out between the 24th of February and 28th of February. It comes after talks between their union and the government broke down again. The union said the government had failed to meet the deadline to put an improved pay offer on the table. However, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says the action called by the BMA Junior Doctor Committee does not signal that they are ready to be reasonable. And British Airways says its plans to resume flights from Israel at the beginning of April. In a statement on their website, the airline says they will resume flights to Tel Aviv, but with a much reduced service from London Heathrow. British Airways suspended services to Tel Aviv amid the growing hostilities between Israel and Hamas following the attack by the terror group on October the 7th. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2604 and €1.1709. The price of gold is £1,613 and 7 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,602 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thanks, Sophia. Now, up at noon, Good Afternoon Britain is on with Tom and Emily, and they're here with us now. Good morning, you two.
Good morning. Lovely to see you. We've clearly coordinated pink and blue. I know,
we're one big happy family.
Oh, here's someone else with long hair.
Oh, yes. Lovely, luscious locks, Emily.
I'm growing mine out so we can all match eventually. But today, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. We're going to talk about some cream eggs.
Oh,
Why
they're
is
my
that?
favourite.
The former Health Minister, Lord Bethel, has been really rather angry that Cadbury's have teamed up with Domino's and made a new cookie cookie cream egg combo. Now, he says this is awful, calorific. He's incensed at the shareholders, incensed at the companies. He's going to have a real right go at them on our show a little bit later. He's coming on.
He said
he's going to tell us.
Disgusted. Now, this is a former health minister, so you can imagine why he's disgusted by this monstrosity of a dessert. But what does he want?
A little treat.
To ban them. To ban them, perhaps.
Well,
we'll find out.
No, well, we're going to be eating some cream eggs live on air, but there are more substantive things that we're talking about as well.
Yes, I don't know if you've seen, but Rishi Sunak didn't rule out Boris Johnson reappearing in the cabinet, so we're going to have a bit of a ding-dong on whether that would be a disaster or whether he'd do a better job.
Because he said that they're still in touch. He's in touch with him, and we were all led to believe there was not much love lost.
And then the question is, what does being in touch mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean that there was a text sent 2 months ago, or does this mean there's regular conversations? I would hasten to suggest that perhaps it's the former rather than the latter, but we'll be speaking to a close ally of Boris Johnson, the Member of Parliament for Peterborough, Paul Bristow, to try and get to the bottom of what's actually going on there. Will Boris be brought back?
And see how many MPs actually would prefer to see Boris Johnson back. I mean, it's going pretty badly for Rishi Sunak if the polls are to be believed. So
It's been
there
a
you
tough
go.
week for him, hasn't it?
It has indeed.
Lots more to come, I'm sure, with you at noon. But for now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We'll be back with you in the next few minutes.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years, 70
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Ellie Costello and Pip Thompson. It is almost 11:42.
Yes.
Joining us now are political commentators Matthew Stadlen and Emma Webb. And let's get serious by talking about this interview. Well, would you call it an interview? Between Russian President Vladimir Putin. His first interview with Western media since the invasion of Ukraine nearly 2 years ago, talking to Tucker Carlson.
Yes, nearly 2.5 hours interview. He consistently raised US interference in Russian affairs. Here's a snippet of what he said.
Do the United States need this? What for? Thousands of miles away from your national territory. Don't you have anything better to do? You have issues on the border, issues with migration, issues with the national debt, more than $33 trillion. You have nothing better to do, so you should fight in Ukraine? Wouldn't it be better to negotiate with Russia, make an agreement, already understanding the situation that is developing today, realizing that Russia will fight for its interests to the end?
Well, political commentators Matthew Stadlin and Emma Webb are back with us in the studio. Matthew, what did you make of this interview between Tucker Carlson and President Putin?
I thought it was a horror show, but I wasn't surprised. And I dare any viewer watching today to try to sit through that interview. And it's almost endless. We have to ask ourselves, why did effectively a dictator who crushes free speech within Russia, who's illegally invaded a sovereign nation in the form of Ukraine, who is accused of war crimes on a sort of industrial scale, why did he grant Tucker Carlson this interview, but none of the other Western journalists who are queuing up to interview him? It's because he thought he would get a soft ride, and of course that's what happened.
Well, a Kremlin spokesperson actually did admit this week that Carlson was hand-picked because of his Moscow-friendly position on the conflict. Emma, do you think that Tucker Carlson was the right choice here? Did he challenge President Putin enough?
Well, I don't think it's not really a question about whether or not he was the right choice. I think what Matthew has said is perfectly valid. It's obvious why Tucker Carlson would be given the interview over someone else. And I don't agree with Tucker Carlson about Ukraine. I do actually like Tucker Carlson's work. I've liked a lot of things that he's done in the past. But to say that whether or not he's the right choice, whether or not he's the right choice for Vladimir Putin, yes, probably. But you know, a lot of people have said he shouldn't have done this interview, and I don't think the public are able to recognise what we've just said. The fact that there's obviously going to be a reason why Putin grants an interview to one journalist over another. The public are capable of understanding that. But I don't agree with people who say that he shouldn't have done the interview. I actually think that it's absolutely fascinating. I disagree with Matthew, although I have to say I haven't had a chance yet to watch it all the way through. But I particularly found the first 30 minutes interesting, where he's giving his own historical account of Russia's relationship with Ukraine. I mean, that is fascinating. It's objectively interesting. So long as you are able to recognise it for what it is.
But it's not necessarily the truth.
No, absolutely not.
How can you possibly say that's fascinating, Emma? We know that this is what Putin thinks, because he gave this long monologue at the outbreak of war with Ukraine when he invaded for the second time a couple of years ago. We don't need an interview with Tucker Carlson to listen to this again. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. Carlson was greeted with great fanfare in Moscow. OK, this is a country and a system that is responsible for the most terrible atrocities, and that 2 years ago, when he invaded Ukraine for the second time, we were wondering how far will Putin go? Will he start shaking his nuclear weapons around? This is a very bad man.
I'm not disputing that, Matthew, at all. I don't disagree with you, but I do think it is interesting. You've got, almost 3 hours of Putin giving...
Is it like going to Berlin in 1940 to speak with Hitler?
And it would be. You can't really compare.
Well, you can.
Well, yes, in a sense. I mean, it's like interviewing Pol Pot or Saddam Hussein,
right?
Or Stalin,
and Saddam Hussein was interviewed by CNN,
yes.
And so was Bin Laden.
And I think that these things are objectively interesting because they give you... So, for example, this interview, we are seeing what Putin wants the West to hear. That is objectively interesting and valuable for what it is. I'm not disputing what Matthew said.
We need to wrap it because we've got to go to a break. But up next, we are talking about President Biden. Is he fit for office? Emma, very sorry. We'll be back with you very shortly.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Emma, you continue your point. I was very conscious that I was had to interrupt you because we had to go to that break. But just continue your point you were making. We're talking about the Tucker Carlson-Putin interview, which has got very controversial.
Well, going back to the point that you were making about is this like interviewing Hitler, I would say to Matthew's point that if, say, there was a video of one of the Mitford sisters interviewing Hitler for 3 hours, and as documentary evidence would be objectively interesting because it would show you what a dictator wants to present. And so, you know, I think, and also going back to your point about whether or not Tucker Carlson was robust enough in pushing back against some of Putin's points, you can see from the beginning of the interview that no matter what Tucker says, that Putin goes on saying what he wants to say regardless. Putin is in charge of that interview from the very, very get-go. And there's this moment where Tucker almost gives this kind of nervous laugh at the beginning where I think he perhaps realises that this is not a normal interview with a politician. This is not an interview with, like, an American politician or the leader of a democratic country. This is like interviewing someone like Kim Jong-un. You know, you're speaking to somebody who potentially has people assassinated, even in foreign countries. But to go back to my point, which I really want to drive home, is that I do think that whether you think that Tucker Carlson is a Putin apologist or not, I think that the interview is still objectively interesting.
Well, what's dangerous about this is that Tucker Carlson is allowing Putin to talk directly to the American people, some of whom are very sceptical about the war on Ukraine, without properly challenging him. Well, where in this 2+ hour interview did Carlson ask him about war crimes in Ukraine? I mean, that's the most basic job of a journalist, coming up against a monstrous, effectively, dictator. who has invaded a sovereign country is mind-boggling.
Sure. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Look, we don't have too long with you. We want to talk about President Biden. In this damaging report, really, Robert Hur's investigation into Joe Biden's handling of classified documents, describing Biden as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And I mean, for the Biden camp, it has just thrusted his age into the spotlight, hasn't it, Emma? And it's already been his biggest weakness.
It's these examples of him having these gaffes have just been endless. I couldn't even recall most of them because there have been so many. And I think that the message that this sends, we've just been talking about Putin and the unstable geopolitical situation. It isn't good to have somebody as the sort of leader of the free world who seems to be, frankly, senile. And even the fact that he has to go and explain that his memory is working just fine. And the guy can't seem to string a sentence together half of the time. It's not good.
But Donald Trump is hardly a spring chicken, is he? He's 77.
This is a very dangerous moment for the free world, right? I was one of many who stayed up most of the night, 2 nights in a row, last time round, hoping that Biden would win. He hasn't done a terrible job, but he seems to me clearly unfit for office, unfit to run again. In the same news conference in which he was defending his memory, he mistook the leader of Egypt for the president of Mexico. If it wasn't so tragic on a personal and on an international scale, it would be almost funny. So something has to be done. The problem is that I don't think you'll find a Democrat candidate who particularly wants to run against Trump with all the trash talking that will involve. They may well just say, I'm not going to go now, I'll wait 4 years. In the meantime, we get another Trump presidency, and that is frightening, particularly given what's going on in Russia with Putin.
So you think that is worse than having someone at the helm who, as many say, is senile?
I think it's a choice that the American people should not have thrust upon them.
That's a pretty horrible choice, isn't it?
One of the questions we should be asking is why is it that in both the Democrat and the Republican Party that they have so many potential good candidates, but they're not the ones who rise to the top.
OK, Emma, Matthew, thank you very much. Really good to see you this morning. That's it from Britain's Newsroom. Up next is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily.
I'm off to get a hair trim. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, indeed, we're up next. Could Boris Johnson be brought back to help a languishing Conservative Party? Rishi Sunak hasn't ruled it out. We'll be having that debate.
And are these disgusting and a danger to your family? Yes, one former health minister has said that Cadbury cream eggs in their combination with cookies could be a danger. Well, other treats are available, but we'll be debating that with the former minister himself, Lord Bethell. All that to come on Good Afternoon Britain.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A wet one again for many of us today. It is mostly rain, though. Some hill snow, though, still across parts of Scotland. Low pressure systems dominating the scene and weather fronts just slowly pushing northwards. Note the isobars squeezing together there across Scotland. Very blustery here with snow on the hills. Met Office yellow warning in place for that snow. Rain at low levels. Further south, it's mostly rain in the form of showers. Hit and miss, so not everywhere having a wet afternoon. Parts of the Midlands may see some decent, drier and brighter spells along with Northern Ireland. But it's still pretty cold across the north, feeling even colder with the wind. Milder air still across the south, temperatures in the teens with a bit of brightness. But there's also some heavy showers to be aware of across the south, generating a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Wet weather continues to feed in across northeast Scotland, so further snow building up over the higher routes here as we go through the night. Another pulse of rain for southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. For parts of England and Wales, it turns dry and clear and temperatures dip well down into single figures. On to Saturday, and for a good chunk of England, it'll be a dry and a bright day. Still windy and wet across northern Scotland. Still some more snow on the hills here, but outbreaks of rain across central parts of Scotland. Then some heavy rain showers in the southwest, but I say a good part of the country will be dry and bright on Saturday with some decent spells of sunshine and still pretty mild in the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 12 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of February.
My memory is fine. Those are the words of US President Joe Biden as he responded angrily to reporters questioning his mental agility. But in the very same press conference, he went on to confuse the president of Mexico with that of Egypt. Is the 81-year-old fit for office?
Putin blames Boris. In an interview with ex-Fox News host Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin hit out at an arrogant Boris Johnson, saying the former British Prime Minister was responsible for continued fighting in Ukraine, claiming he sabotaged a peace deal. Boris' derangement syndrome goes global.
This is disgusting. That's the claim of former Health Minister Lord Bethell as he hit out at Domino's and Cadbury for creating a new disgusting and egregious cookie cream egg combination. He says shareholders should be ashamed of this culinary innovation. But is he just shouting at cookies? We'll sit down with the Noble Lord later this hour.
Now, the polls aren't good for the Conservative Party, and there have been multiple different relaunches. First, Rishi Sunak tried to say that he was going to be the change candidate. Now he's saying, stick with the plan. And then he was going on about reversing some of the green policies. There have been lots of different relaunches, but one that has been floated by one minister this week is bringing back Boris Johnson.
Yes, what do you make of that? Bringing back Boris Johnson. Certainly a divisive character. But could he actually do a better job? I mean, if you look at the most recent poll, this is YouGov, the Conservatives are on 21, Labour are up to on 46. Could it get worse for the Conservatives at this point? Is Boris Johnson, should he be brought back into the fold, brought back into cabinet, or is there too much animosity there?
It's ironic because, of course, the Conservatives, when they were, you know, single digits behind in the polls, decided to get rid of Boris Johnson because they thought they were too far behind. Well, what has happened since? It does seem like the most extraordinary couple of years.
We're going to be having this debate later on in the show, actually, because we've got two people with very different views on that one, whether it would be worth bringing Boris back. Have you seen the back of him? Do you no longer want to hear much from him? But we shall find out. GBViews at gbnews.com. But first, your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 12. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour, Russia's president has told TV presenter Tucker Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the Ukraine war. Asked if he could imagine a scenario in which he would send Russian troops to Poland, he said only if Poland attacks Russia. He went on to say that Russia has no interest in Poland, Latvia or anywhere else. In his first interview sitting down with a Western journalist since Russia's invasion, Putin also said he has no interest in speaking with the US president until certain demands are met.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
And the Prime Minister says Putin's claims that the West and NATO are to blame for the war in Ukraine are clearly ridiculous.
Clearly ridiculous. Russia conducted an illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. I'm proud that the UK has stood strongly with Ukraine from the beginning. I was there earlier this year, the first foreign leader to visit. It was my first visit of the year to announce significant military support to Ukraine and also a broader security relationship with them. We can't let this type of behaviour go unchecked. It impacts all of our security. We've already seen the impact it had on everyone's energy bills.
Rishi Sunak speaking there. Now, the US President Joe